Hey everyone, Karnak here, Star Wars Armada Explained. Thanks for joining me today. We're going to be redoing the Admiral Raddus Commander video because he got an updated errata. And his errata really changes how he works now compared to before. Lots of things are still the same. But again, I want to make sure I'm getting that updated, put out there, and getting correct information. So Admiral Raddus, his ability before the change was that pretty much you could just drop a ship anywhere at distance one of any one of your ships, and it was very, not that I would say that he was game breaking, but man, it just was very difficult sometimes to try to counter some of his gameplay mechanics. And usually, in my experience, I never really enjoyed facing Admiral Raddus or even playing Admiral Raddus because it just felt like it wasn't. It was very hard to just try to figure out what Admiral Raddus was going to do because he didn't have to make that decision. Well, FFG has felt like, you know what, maybe that ability was a little bit too powerful, and especially with the Starhawk coming out, they didn't want the Starhawk being able to be dropped on anybody because the Starhawk is a command for ship, very powerful, and they felt that, you know what, that's a bit too much. We need to completely change how he works. So he did get a hard errata. And you'll see there, I've got him blown up nice and big right now so you can read his card. So Admiral Raddus, to start with first things first, Admiral Raddus is a faction-specific commander for the Rebel Alliance. He's 26 points. He is unique. You'll see there by a little dot or bullet point in front of his name. You can only have one of them in your fleet. So if there were other Admiral Raddus's cards you could bring, you would have to choose which one. His card text now reads, before deploying fleets, you may set aside one other friendly ship with a command value of 3 or less, so no Starhawks. At the start of any round, you may deploy that ship at distance 1 to 2 of you. That ship cannot be deployed overlapping squadrons and cannot be the first ship to activate that round. So big changes, because before it was just any ship you could put in the hyperspace. Now it pretty much is just saying no Starhawks. And it also said you could drop that ship at distance 1 of any ship. That is no longer the case. It is now at distance 1 to 2 of the ship Admiral Raddus is equipped to. And the rest of the card checks, it remains unchanged, which is you can't drop them on top of squadrons. It can't be the first ship to activate that round. So let's dive right into all the wonderful, wonderful mechanics that Admiral Raddus gets to play with. And again, I'm going to go through step by step, explain everything how it works. You can see there I got a lot on the board. I know it's a lot. It's going to be a long video, but let's dive right in. So first things first, let's talk about how the mechanics and all this work. So before deploying fleets, you need to set aside a ship. So let's go ahead and we're just going to make a clone copy of this MC-75. So for example, we'll say that Admiral Raddus has 2 MC-75s in his fleet. Does he have other stuff? Sure. Well, it's there. You just can't see it. So you would choose a ship to set aside. You would say, you know what? I'm going to take this MC-75 here on the right, and I'm going to set that aside. That ship is now in hyperspace. Now, I do want to point out that anything that is set aside, you can't use like any card abilities or card mechanics or anything like that that's on that ship. Like, for example, if Hondo Anaka or Strategic Advisor was on the set-aside ship, you can't use their abilities because that ship is set aside, and you just can't use card abilities that are set aside and not in the play area. They're not on the table, meaning they have no effect. Want to make sure I was being clear with that. Okay, so we take that MC-75, we check it aside, it's in hyperspace. Now this MC-75 is the ship that Admiral Raddus is actually equipped to. So now, at the start of any round, so before command dials are set, before anything else is done, at the start of any round, you say, aha, I'm going to deploy that ship at distance 1 to 2 of you, which you always means that ship that he is equipped to. So you bring up the range band, and again, when it says at, and on here you've got the distance band, so black circle is distance 1, red is distance 2, 3, 4, 5, etc. So when it says at distance 2, you can just barely have a teeny tiny little corner touching, as you can see there, just touching that ship. That is at distance 2. Now, if you want, you can definitely put that ship anywhere in here. because again, it's at distance 1 to 2. So pretty much, if you wanted to just chuck it right there, you could absolutely chuck it right there. If you want it to be just barely nicking the corner, that works as well. Because when you range, you're ranging from closest plastic point of the base to the closest plastic point of the base of the ship. You don't range from cardboard to cardboard. You do not count the shield frames or the shield dials. They're not considered part of the ship base. So don't measure from those places. Again, only the physical ship base is how you range it from. And then you drop the ship, and that's it. So one thing to go over, though, is that enemy squadrons is you cannot deploy the Raddus ship overlapping enemy squadrons. So something like this, like, oh, nope, can't deploy there, can't deploy there. But obviously you can kind of finagle your way around that when we move this card out of the way. You can, kind of get around that a little bit, because you could do something like this, maybe. You can kind of maneuver that ship a little bit, and then there you go. Now you are at distance 2, and we'll say like maybe the Star Destroyer is right there. Well, now he's got 2 MC-75s heading right for him. The big change with this is that distance 2 drop from Raddus is, man, you can kind of get, if the ship is like over here, and if you don't have squadrons or other ships to kind of help hem in, your Star Destroyer can end up in a bad way when suddenly he's like, oh man, I got that MC-75 dead to rights, and then all of a sudden you drop this MC-75 right over here, because then if you bring up the range band, well, look at that, he's not in front arc, he's in side arc, and now he's pumping his little legs straight towards your Star Destroyer, and you're going to have a really bad time. Compare that too with, like, you've got Liberties now, and just the distance change makes Admiral Raddus more threatening, but now you get a better sense of where he's dropping his ships than before, which was just like he just could be anywhere, and you didn't have a lot of counterplay to that. So just to state up front, I like the new changes. I know some people really hate it. They're saying, "No, Raddus is dead." Blah blah blah. It's not. He's not dead. He's still very good. He still can take a large ship and plop him into a very advantageous position and still ruin your day. But not to get off on a tangent, we still got lots to cover. But again, that's Raddus. For that, and again, the ship that gets dropped cannot be the first ship to activate. So if you're a first player and you drop that ship, you can't choose. You can't choose that ship to go first. Another physical ship has to activate. Why do I state that? He does have an FAQ. Let's read it. Bring up the FAQ here. I should have had that ready to go already. That's all right. We can find this card here real quick. He's just down here real close. There he is. So what does this FAQ say? If the ship with this upgrade equipped is destroyed, after resolving this card's effect to deploy a ship, the ship that was deployed by this card effect still cannot be the first ship to activate that round. So again, if for whatever reason Admiral Raddus, he drops the deployed ship and then somehow instantaneously explodes right after that, his ability to prevent a ship from activating still in effect, because you've resolved that whole thing. So that is, still restricting that ship, even if somehow he's now off the play table because he got destroyed. Second part here, during the ship phase of the round in which a ship is deployed by this card's effect, if all of both players' ships are prevented from activating by card effects such as Admiral Raddus or Governor Price, a ship deployed by this card's effect may activate, even if it is the first ship to activate that round. Why does it go through all of this? What is it talking about? Pretty much it's saying for the ships, pretty much is just, they're really trying to prevent Raddus from just being able to plop a ship, activate it, blow stuff up, and then it bounces on its merry way. Is by and large what that is trying to prevent. But it is now, it's also saying, if for whatever reason, if Raddus dropped a ship and then he explodes, and another player, Raddus, dropped a ship and then his ship explode, what would happen? Because technically both ships can't go. Well, then it's saying, then the first player has to go. Same thing when the MC-75 with the Raddus drops. If the Imperial player has Governor Price on it, Governor Price's ability to have to activate last, that overrides Raddus' if Raddus has, again, no other ships he can activate. If he has no other ships he can activate, then he has to activate and move. But again, just to be very, very clear, if it's Raddus's turn to activate and he can't activate, he passes a turn to Imperial player, and if the Imperial player has a ship he can move, has to move it. Pretty much, don't move the ships unless those are literally the only ships that can move. And then first player first, when Raddus on Raddus, second player second. And in the case of Raddus against Price, Price is always last. I know that sounds confusing. If you have any questions, leave a comment. I can explain it in more detail, but I think you guys kind of get it. Now, to go along with this whole activating bit, let's talk about Strategic Advisor and real quick. So Strategic Advisor, on its card text, it says, when it is your turn to activate, you may exhaust this card to pass your turn. Your opponent activates a ship instead. A lot of players have gotten confused, like, oh, I'll drop my Raddus dropship that has this card equipped, and then I'm going to activate Strategic Advisor, and now he has to come towards me. It's like, well, no, because remember, you cannot choose the Raddus dropship to activate. Cannot choose means you can't even choose the Strategic Advisor, because again, what does it say? When it's your turn to activate, meaning you, as in that ship, you may exhaust this card to give your turn, or to pass your turn. Again, due to how Raddus is worded, you cannot choose that ship to then choose Strategic Advisor to pass your turn. Okay. Again, technical, rules that states all that, but yes, you cannot use Strategic Advisor on the drop ship. Now, if another ship activates and goes, then you've passed that requirement for Raddus about that not being the first ship to activate. Then you can use Strategic Advisor. You can choose that ship for activation and then choose Mr. Grumpy Face there. So again, want to make sure I'm being very clear on all of this. Now let's get into some of the major rulings for like card interactions, other things going on. So I do want to point out that when a ship is set aside in hyperspace, it cannot be chosen to resolve any cards set aside. Meaning, for example, if you set aside this MC-75 cruiser, if you have like officers like Hondo Naka or other cards similar to it, you can't use those cards to do anything or resolve anything. If they have to wait till they get on the play table. Same deal with like Bail Organa. A lot of players are like, oh, I'm going to put Bail Organa's ship in hyperspace, and then I'm going to set his round for when he can activate. And again, can't do that. Why is that? Because again, any ship that is set aside, if they're not on the play table for timing triggers like after deployment, they are not on the play space and are not able to resolve those card effects. So cards like Bail Organa or objectives like, for example, Fleet and Bean, Precision Strike, Advanced Gunnery, Sensor Run or Salvage Run, Most Wanted, and Opening Salvo, those require timings of after deploying fleets is when you either select targets or hand out tokens and things of that nature. Because again, that ship is set aside, it cannot be targeted or have card effects resolved again when it's set aside. So you can't choose that ship for Most Wanted, you can't give it an objective token for Opening Salvo, you can't give it a navigation token like in Salvage Run or other objectives similar to that. Because again, it's not on the play space after deployment. So again, I'm trying to be very crystal clear with that. And another thing is that there are other card effects, like for example, like Endeavor and other card effects where it says at the start of the first round, gain this or do this. Again, if it's not in the play space, you don't get to resolve those card abilities. And so you paid for those abilities to get no benefit. You get nothing. All right, so I want to make sure I was covering all that. We can go ahead and delete these things here just to clear the play space. Let's touch on some more objectives. Let's touch on Hyperspace Assault. So Hyperspace Assault, you could, for example, put Raddus on this small ship here and then stuff this small ship. So what you want to do first is you want to take your MC-75, for example, stuff that into the Raddus hyperspace. Then Raddus, who's equipped to the small ship for Hyperspace Assault, you can set that ship aside. And then as the game progresses, you could drop Raddus out of hyperspace near this objective token, for example, because that's at distance 1 there. And then after you've dropped them, you can then Raddus a ship out from that. Something like that. So that for hyperspace assault, I think you're going to see that a lot more in Raddus's fleets for that ability. Maybe not though, but that's definitely something that you can do. So that's hyperspace assault. Let's see here. Let's talk about, get that turned off. Whoops. Let's talk about some objectives that still work on ships that are deployed and on ships that are set aside. Things like intel sweep, because when you can choose. Let's see here. Starting with the second player. So for intel sweep, you can choose a set aside ship as the objective ship because the timing of all this takes place after placing obstacles, but before ships are deployed or set aside or anything like that. So you can choose a Raddus ship to be an objective ship for that. Yep, because that's before that. And then also, any second player Raddus ship, even if it is set aside, does gain the objective token from blockade run. Because again, as it says there, let's see the special rule. The second player assigns one objective token to each of his ships. It doesn't give a timing window for it. It just says, hey, do you have a ship? Give it an objective token. It doesn't matter if it's set aside or in the play space. Want to make sure I was covering that. Let's talk about obstacles. Now, what happens if you're to drop a ship on an obstacle? Let's bring out an asteroid field here. Let's say that you deploy a ship on an obstacle. Do you take damage from that? No. The only time that you suffer damage from obstacles or when you resolve obstacle effects is when you execute a maneuver and overlap them. Deployment in placing is not overlapping, meaning you can deploy over obstacles with your Raddus ship, which is totally fine. You can absolutely do that, and you won't suffer the effect of that because again, it's not a movement, it's a deployment. And when you do deploy your ships, by the way, you do have to set a speed for your deployed ships. The only time that you could ever set your speed to 0 is if you deploy your Raddus ship near a G7 grav well projector, because that stays on the board the entire game, and any ship that is deployed near it does have to start at speed 0. That's the only time that the Raddus ship would be able to go speed 0. Okay, I want to make sure I was covering that interaction. We've got the interaction with the obstacles here. So why do I bring that up with the obstacles? Well, this affects objectives such as navigational hazards, dangerous territory, and infested fields, where if ships overlap obstacles, you get victory points, either for one player or another. So I wanted to bring that up because I have seen a game before where somebody had overlapped obstacles, something like this. I think that, yeah, had overlapped obstacles like this. And he's like, oh, I claim victory tokens because you overlapped both of these obstacles. And no, again, deployment is not overlapping. You may be overlapping when your ship is there, but in terms of does this count for actually getting victory points and tokens and things of that nature? No. Again, deployment is not executing maneuver. It is deployment. It's a placement. Now, if that ship somehow stays there after executing maneuver, meaning, either it drops to speed 0 and stays there and executes a maneuver in place, or it moves, then it is then physically overlapping that obstacle if it's touching that obstacle with its base or with its shield dials. So again, want to make sure I was being crystal clear on that because that does affect those 3 objectives. Well, what about mines, you say? I can see here, you might be noticing I've got mine tokens and I've got the minefield objective here. What about these? So pretty much the same deal, because again, these, whether it be the proximity mine token or the objective token representing mines for minefields, these only trigger when a ship executes a maneuver. Meaning you can drop your Raddus ship down on the table, and you can drop them on top of the mines if you do want. They don't prevent the ship from deploying. They're not squadrons or other ships. So they can be deployed at distance 1 of these mines, the mines will not go off. But again, same deal like with the obstacles. If it moves and if it's still at distance 1 of these mines, then the mines will go off and they will explode and deal all the damages. All right. Covered that. Let's get down into aspiration. So there is a card, which for some reason the card text on these updated cards is like really fuzzy for whatever reason. But aspiration in a nutshell is when that ship deploys, it can move shields. Again, that timing window is when it deploys. So if you do have an MC-75 with aspiration and you do choose that as your ship to set aside, when it does deploy onto the table, you can resolve the aspiration card effect and change your shield positioning to do the shield effects that are associated with that card. I want to make sure that I was pointing that out as well. And I'm not going to be covering every single example of every single card because there's just too many. But this should be giving you enough information that you can be like, oh, this is similar, etc., etc. Now, there's one more interaction I want to cover with Profundity, but before we do that, I want to just double check that I've been hitting all the points here with Raddus. Yep, covered Hyperspace Assault. Going to be covering Profundity here in a moment. Covered Strategic Advisor, Price, Bale, Endeavor, the objectives. Yep. Got that. Aspiration, perfect. The mines. So for proximity mines and Raddus, so if you do have proximity mines equipped to your ships, you can place the proximity mines first before setting a ship aside into hyperspace. Totally allowed. So say you've got a large ship that has proximity mines equipped, you could be like, all right, I'm going to put out my proximity mine tokens. Okay, now I'm taking this ship and putting it into hyperspace. All good. Absolutely can do that. And then covered the Gravwell. Perfect. So all I've got left to do is go over Profundity. So a tactic people were using before was that they would have a ship and they would, have Raddus, somewhere else hiding like a coward. They would have the Profundity, which allows you to stuff a ship, set it aside in the MC-75. It allows you to deploy that ship at the start of any round at distance 1, and then people would take that Raddus ship and then drop it, something crazy like that. Well, now you technically still can do that, but Raddus is going to be in a little bit more danger to accomplish this. What do I mean by that? Well, so you could have a small ship like a hammerhead. Raddus is equipped to that hammerhead. You can have Profundity on one MC-75. You take Raddus, you set aside, like for example, I have another MC-75. I set that aside in hyperspace with Raddus's ability. I then take Raddus and stuff him into Profundity. Then, at some point in the game, I'm going to be like, oh, there's a Star Destroyer there. I want to get it. So at the start of the round, you can be like, you know what? I'm going to deploy this Profundity that has my Admiral Raddus in it. I'm going to do something like this, which is at distance 1 of that MC-75. Perfect. All right, now I'm going to use Raddus's ability because now he is in the play area. I can resolve his card because, again, if Raddus is set aside, can't use his card ability. He has to be on the table. You can then bring up his range band for distance 1 to 2, and then, oh, looky there. Turn this guy. I can now deploy this MC-75. Something like that. Which, again, should be out of the front arc. Sure is. I can even get a little bit more aggressive here and do something like that. And then, or even turn it. And then, boom. And you can do something like that. Now, Admiral Raddus, if you deploy him in the front arc of a Star Destroyer, he's not going to be long for this world, but he kind of has done his job. Or even if you wanted to try to save some shots on him, you could, deploy your MC-75 to where he's, either obstructing or you've got that double arc. So a lot of flexibility there. Or even in some case, yeah, sure, you lost Raddus on a naked hammerhead, but then if you table your opponent, you're still going to be way ahead. So want to make sure I was pointing out that watch out for this nesting doll tactic because while it was a thing before that just kind of wasn't too much of a point to it, now you're probably going to see something like this a little bit more often. Or maybe not, who knows. but I want to make sure I was showing that that is something you can do with Profundity. All right, that's Admiral Raddus, everybody. It was a lot of talking. I know it's a lot of information all at once. But for... Oh, right, Gravity Rift. Oh my gosh, I totally forgot the Gravity Rift. So when you are deploying a ship, if there's a Gravity Rift on the board, remember one of the attributes of the Gravity Rift is that any ship deploying at distance 1 to 2 of it has to start at speed 0. So if you do deploy a Raddus ship at distance 1 to 2 of this Gravity Rift, you will start at speed 0. Again, you can deploy overlapping it if you want, but just understand that that might not be the best thing you want to do with your ship starting at speed 0 and then essentially not ever being able to escape for quite some time. All right, that is... Want to make sure I was covering that. I'm glad I remembered that at the last second. Perfect. All right. Of course, if you have any questions, if you think I missed anything, if I got any wrong, leave some comments. Let me know about it. I appreciate you guys watching. Going to get this video uploaded. Always more content to come. I'm working very diligently on my Armada reference manual, getting that updated. And hey, I'll see you guys all next time.